Hello, my name is Nabila Talib, and I am a social work lecturer here at Oxford Brookes University. I've been teaching for around 3 years now, but primarily the work that I've been involved in and the background that I have is of being a social worker. And the main kind of work I've done is with asylum seekers and refugees, mostly in the field of immigration detention work. So it's been an interesting journey getting to this point because I feel like I haven't really had the most traditional journey towards social work. I used to work with these charities in Oxford, and most of the experience I got was volunteering and visiting people in detention centres. And I thought that that was just the most perfect route into getting into social work and becoming a qualified social worker, because then I'd have the tools to be able to work properly in this field in the future. I quickly realized that asylum seekers and people who are in immigration detention come under no recourse to public funds, which basically means that they don't have access to the welfare state. And the welfare state is basically what social workers, especially statutory social workers, are part of administering. And so they didn't really have access to asylum seekers in the way that I imagined that they would. I imagined that social workers, because they uphold values of social justice and principles of human rights, that they would be working with asylum seekers and people in immigration detention. But that was not the case. And even when people got refugee status, which meant that they could then access the welfare state, social workers didn't really have specific training in looking at the needs of refugees. And they didn't really have any specialist services looking at the needs of refugees, the kind of trauma they might have gone through in their journey of coming over to the UK, the kind of trauma they face with the asylum system. There wasn't really anything in place to recognize these things. But the work that I saw, the most amount of work that I saw where social workers were engaging with asylum seekers was when I looked at children's services, and a lot of the work was with unaccompanied asylum seeking children. And as someone whose parents, so I've pretty much grown up with unaccompanied asylum seeking children in our house because my parents were involved with fostering. And so I had some idea of what these young people kind of go through and the kind of challenges that they face. And that wasn't really the kind of social work I wanted to get involved with, because social workers in that area are involved with age assessments. And age assessments to me is kind of part of the surveillance of the state when it comes to dealing with asylum seekers. So when you look at age assessments, you're very much part of figuring out whether or not that person is eligible for support based on their age, and working out someone's age, figuring out their backstory, figuring out whether or not there are loopholes in the story, whether or not they're telling the truth, isn't really the kind of social work I wanted to get involved with. I didn't want to look at someone I wanted to support through the lens of suspicion. And that would create a really difficult relationship, I think, between someone you're trying to support. And so that wasn't really the social work I wanted to be involved with. So I've now realized that I'm very much trying to critique this mainstream social work that, on the one hand, talks about these values and principles that they have around social justice and valuing equality and human rights, but at the same time, they're involved in a system that doesn't really offer support to people who are seeking asylum or who find themselves in immigration detention. We're not really challenging these structures. And so I felt like I had to carve my own path within social work. And so what I did then was to get involved in the academic side, which helps me to teach students about what I know in terms of work with asylum seekers, challenging their perceptions around what is social work and what isn't social work. Because often when I told people that I wanted to get involved with immigration detention work, they said, well, that doesn't really count as social work, I don't think. So I'm trying to challenge that through my teaching, and I'm trying to work on research in trying to critique the role of social work in a lot of these structures. And at the same time, I am working with an organization that basically supports people in immigration detention. And I do casework in the way that you would as a statutory social worker. So I have a caseload of people that I support and advocate on behalf of. And I basically, and most of the people are either in immigration detention centers or they are under immigration powers but in prisons. And our main role is to make sure that we can offer practical and emotional support, especially when people find themselves in really isolated situations. It's really important to be able to be there to even help them realize that someone is out there who's trying to look after their well-being and the kind of support they need around their mental health. And I think in situations in the UK, when the UK doesn't actually have a time limit on immigration detention, it can really take the toll on people's mental health. And so it's really important. It's really important work that I think we're trying to do. But at the same time, we are also involved in campaigns and policy-related work where we challenge the legislation and policy of the government, working with local campaigns to try and end immigration detention in as a practice and as an institution. And so this is the kind of social work that I thought would be ideal, because not only am I able to do the kind of day-to-day like one-to-one kind of work with the people who are in immigration detention, but also feeding into the kind of larger structure, so the policies and the legislation and the campaigns. So for me, I think it seems like a very holistic kind of work where I'm able to kind of tap into all these different areas, and the academic side helps me to stay engaged with the next generation of social workers and helping them realize what I've learned through my journey. So I have to say I'm not the most traditional kind of social worker, but I feel like a lot of the work I do is helping to challenge some of the norms that I think have been created within the profession, and trying to see whether or not we can create a better kind of profession which is more aligned with its value base and the principles that we try to uphold. And a social work which I feel in the future will be a lot more able to work and include people who are truly on the margins of society, which I think is the role of social work in general. Okay, so I will end it right there. I'm happy to be asked any questions, and if Juman can take the questions and just send them my way, I'm happy to engage with this conversation. Thank you.